So my name is Vishal Salvi. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and head of the cybersecurity business for Infosys. I've been in the industry for almost 3 decades now, and out of that, 2 decades, more than 2 decades in cybersecurity. In a very significant manner, not just in terms of what we have done in past, but what actually we should expect in future, because the way in which the cybersecurity expectations are growing, we can't be expected to throw people at solving this problem, because there's a huge demand and there is a dwindling supply, as far as cybersecurity professionals are concerned. So the only way to really scale the protection and monitoring and recovery is through hyper automation, and AI plays a very important role in achieving those goals and objectives, especially trying to automate all the repeatable work that is done by the cybersecurity professionals, so that they can focus on innovation and all the cognitive work which is required for cyber defense. So you need to see in the context of what has happened in the pharmaceutical industry, and also the history of cybersecurity attacks in general. And you would see that initially the attacks were largely focused on financial transactions and going after the money, or creating high impact targets, or going for hacktivism and so on and so forth. And so there were specific industries like the financial industry or insurance industry or capital markets or telecom industry, which were targeted as compared to the other industries. What we have seen in the last 4 to 5 years is that with the attacks generally moving into something called ransomware attacks or advanced malware attacks, which are not only targeting a particular industry, but basically targeting any potential company which can get impacted, and they could demand a ransom. So as a result, those industries which were not targeted earlier have now become a potential target, right? And some of them have also become victims. So I think that is something which has impacted the pharmaceutical industry as well, and those who are obviously pioneers and have invested in security are still better off, but there are many who had not really invested enough, and they are obviously facing the brunt of these avalanche of advanced attacks which are coming their way. Specifically from the pharmaceutical industry point of view, you need to really worry about data exfiltration, reconnaissance, where confidentiality of your information, confidentiality of your IP becomes of high importance. We saw that in the situation of pandemic, where there were many instances where the threat actors were targeting pharmaceutical companies to get access to the formulas for vaccine, and that became a very critical information, not just for the companies but also for the nations who were investing in development of those vaccines. So historically, IP and formula information has been a significant matter of importance for these companies, and therefore also a potential target. With the digitization and everything getting into computers, all the more, right? And with attacks like ransomware or advanced persistent threat, all the more, because what's happening is that all of this is having a double whammy effect, where not only your IP is getting digitized, but it's also getting indiscriminate amount of threats, where we are not just talking about ransomware, but it's talking about a dormant malware which is collecting, just doing nothing but collecting data. Uh, an example of that is SolarWinds, right, which was a third-party supply chain attack, which potentially targeted all the 33,000 companies which were using that software, which was perfectly whitelisted software managing the IT assets and availability of the IT assets for these companies. But there was a backdoor which was deployed to them, and a large portion of these companies actually installed that updated software, which actually had the backdoor. And then eventually, the attacker actually could exfiltrate data for the targets that they chose. They are of significance, and some of them could have been pharmaceutical companies. So that's what I meant by the threat of to the confidentiality of the data. And then there have been, the other things related to denial of service attacks, or people falling prey and sharing their confidential information. And so therefore, whether it's corporate espionage or whether it is a national espionage. So I think the threats are across all the three parts, whether it is availability of the service or confidentiality of the data, and to some extent integrity of the information. Multiple parameters for one to define a good cybersecurity system, but it all starts from what is the tone that you want to set for your organization. Do you want to everybody publicly says that cybersecurity is a very important problem to solve, but when we start looking at and when we start peeling the onion, we start seeing that there are different levels of maturity at different organizations, right? And so you would want to, if an ideal cybersecurity strategy or program should have a leadership in cybersecurity which has empowerment and mandate to go down and implement a change, to constantly keep updating their infrastructure and their program as you start seeing the dynamically changing threat landscape. Number three, you democratize cybersecurity implementation across your organization. You don't leave it to only a set of people, because every single individual needs to play their role, whether it is end users, whether it is leadership, whether it is business users, whether it is your enabling functions, all of them, and even IT and development teams, all of them need to play their role and democratize cybersecurity within the organization. There need to be enough amount of money and budgets being available, adequate enough to manage the risk posture of your organization. The cybersecurity function needs to be deeply integrated with the risk management function of your organization, so that there is the visibility of cyber threats is also part of your operation risk management. And the lastly, and very importantly, the leadership and the board need to have a very strong oversight on managing the day-to-day activities and also the mandates that you're giving for cybersecurity. So all of these things are extremely important to ensure a robust cybersecurity. I'm assuming that when you do all of these things, you would have a team which is capable, motivated to execute your program for your organization. There are two reasons why it could increase. Just like we're talking about use of AI for cybersecurity, there will obviously be many use cases where there will be use of AI in the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of various applications that they have and how they want to apply AI. And that is, but naturally it's going to happen. When that happens, traditionally a computer industry has been looking at your input and your output, and anything happens in between that application, so long as you're tested and build the application in a way, it will perform exactly what it was supposed to do. So it was almost like a black box, but we knew exactly what it is there. and so you're validating the input and validating the output, and so long as you're okay, you're fine that the system is working fine. But with AI, we need to start investigating the algorithms, because the output will constantly change based on how the AI improves the knowledge and trains itself. And so it could very well be trained and poisoned to do things in an adversarial way, right? And you will not even know, especially in future when you would lose the competence of really understanding what's happening, and your dependence on AI will become so much that you will just start trusting the output coming from there, that you would not even know what has actually gone into coming out with that output. So therefore, building a trust model on how that algorithm is performing what it's supposed to do, and it is learning with the good intent and not in a bad intent, I think it's going to be very critical, especially not allowing anybody to poison it, or creating something which will start creating the problem of integrity for your output. So I think those are some of the things where we need to do a lot of work, and a lot of it is actually in the space of cybersecurity, because we are the ones who need to come out with models by which we can do this assurance. I think I talked about some of the best practices which actually defines a mature cybersecurity organization. But when it, I think, comes to policies, I think it's very, very important to play to define what is it that you would want to do, because cybersecurity is all about trade-offs, right? Every time you define a control, and it has not reached a level of maturity where you could have every possible control implemented without any discomfort or perception of being monitored or being slowed down because of the control. It's not reached that maturity. So therefore, you'll always have to do a trade-off between a convenience or experience versus security. And whenever that trade-off is required, you need to have a strong policy-driven approach as to what is the policy that you want to operate. Let me give you an example. So at Infosys, we have a policy which says that we will have every single of our mobile devices encrypted, right? 100%. And that could cause some amount of friction in the experience of users, because the machines can slow down because of encryption, or it can stop, it can malfunction during the upgrade process or whatever. But that discomfort, or that slight perceptible reduction of slowness is acceptable risk or acceptable trade-off that I'm willing to take to ensure that I get 100% encryption. So these are, but there are 350 plus controls, and every control you need to take a decision on policy on how you want to operate that control. The AI per se, as opportunities for modeling across various business applications is real, and there are so many commoditized services which are available right now, which you can buy on the edge, you can buy on the cloud, which can do some very profound changes to your business processes. So AI from that aspect is real. I mean, it's not like the theoretical construct of AI as we thought, where suddenly computers will start behaving like humans. I think it's not going to be as dramatic as that, but it's going to be giving you those microservices which will help you to build and improve your processes in a very fundamental manner, right? Which and in a very irreversible manner, right? So that's really what is going to happen for sure in a business space. But it is also happening in cybersecurity, right? And we are seeing many examples of that, where traditionally you would want to look at all the charts and graphs and alerts and start looking at it with human eye and then decipher it and decide on what we need to do. Today, you can train the system to do that through an AI and just tell you through a report what those outliers and exceptions are. So you don't need to scan through all these trends and reports to decide on what is working and what's not. And AI can do it for you in cybersecurity, right? So there are many such examples of applications of AI in cyber. So I think in both places, I think the opportunities are immense, and we are already seeing a benefit of that.